It may seem highly unlikely, but during World War II, a dentist fought off and killed more than 90 Japanese soldiers who attacked his field hospital during the Battle of Saipan. This is the story of Ben L. Salomon, a United States Army dentist who, for his courage that transcended duty, earned the Medal of Honor. Ben Salomon was born on September 1, 1914 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to an American Jewish family. From an early age, he was committed to his studies and to working hard, traits that would lead him to follow a career in healthcare. After completing high school, Ben enrolled at the University of Southern California, where he initially considered becoming a doctor. He ended up opting for dentistry, however. Salomon graduated as a dentist and started his own practice, where he worked hard, earning respect for his technical skill and attention to detail. But with the outbreak of the Second World War, he felt the need to serve his country in a more direct way. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1940, first as a regimental dentist. During his service, he showed not only his skill in odontology, but also an impressive capacity to adapt, earning the respect of his peers and superiors. He was appointed regimental surgeon in 1944, even though he did not have a medical degree, due to the urgent need for qualified personnel to tend to the wounded on the front lines. That was how Ben L. Salomon ended up on Saipan, a small Pacific island where the U.S. Army was engaged in one of the most intense battles of the war. While he was there to care for the wounded, destiny would place him in direct confrontation with the enemy, and he did not hesitate to answer with a heroic act that would save many lives. The Battle of Saipan, fought from June 15th to July 9th, 1944, was one of the most important World War II campaigns in the Pacific. Found in the Mariana Islands, Saipan was of crucial strategic interest to the United States. Capturing it would allow them to establish air bases within direct range of mainland Japan, allowing intensive bombing of Japanese cities and industries. Additionally, the takeover of Saipan would cut off Japan's communication lines and vital supplies, weakening its ability to resist even further. Defending Saipan was key for Japan, as its loss meant the imminent approach of Allied forces and a blunt threat to the very heart of the empire. The American victory in the battle was a turning point in the Pacific War theater, clearing the way for the end of the conflict with Japan. During the final days of the Battle of Saipan, on the morning of July 7, 1944, the field hospital where Ben Salomon was working as a makeshift surgeon came under massive attack from Japanese forces. As the Americans pushed forward on the island, the Japanese army, in a desperate attempt to retake control, unleashed a Banzai charge, a suicide attack involving thousands of soldiers charging in waves against the American lines. One of the targets was the field hospital, where dozens of wounded soldiers unable to fend for themselves were being treated. Mayhem quickly broke out. Screaming explosions and gunfire filled the impromptu facility, and the few doctors and nurses working there soon found it almost impossible to evacuate. Ben Salomon, hearing the first sounds of approaching battle, took a decision that would change the course of those tragic hours. Realizing that the wounded soldiers could not move and that the hospital could not be protected by anyone else, Salomon decided to take up arms. The dentist grabbed the rifle of a wounded soldier and proceeded to guard the hospital against the Japanese soldiers who managed to break through the defense line. When the hospital's last defenses were about to collapse, with Ben ordering the evacuation of the wounded, he moved in on an M1917 Browning machine gun that had been rendered inactive by the death of its operator. With the cold blood of a surgeon, he started firing at the waves of Japanese soldiers pushing towards the hospital. The bursts from Salomon's machine gun allowed enough time for many of the wounded to be safely taken to another position. The dentist shot down dozens of Japanese soldiers who were charging, with their chests wide open in a suicidal rampage. But not all the bravery in the world could stop so many enemies. When the battle on Saipan had finally ceased, the American soldiers headed back to the field hospital to rescue those who had not made it out. They found the body of Ben L. Salomon lying next to his M1917 Browning machine gun among the wreckage and wounded. The surrounding area was strewn with dead enemies, an impressive testament to his last, isolated resistance. The soldiers who found him were astonished to see that he had killed around 98 enemy men before being shot down. 4 of these were inside the hospital, killed as they tried to storm his post. Salomon's body was riddled with bullet and bayonet wounds, a clear sign that he had bravely fought to the end. Following weeks of heavy fighting, the American forces, consisting mainly of Marines and Army personnel, managed to defeat the Japanese defending the island. The latter fought with fierce determination until the very end, resorting to ferocious resistance tactics such as suicide attacks and the final Banzai charge, in which thousands of Japanese soldiers unleashed a desperate attack on the American lines, including the hospital where Ben Salomon was stationed. But Japanese resistance was insufficient. With the fall of Saipan, the United States secured a crucial foothold in the Western Pacific, allowing B-29 Superfortress planes to operate from the island to deliver airstrikes directly on mainland Japan. The victory at Saipan was a watershed moment in the Allied push into the Pacific, bringing them closer to invading the main Japanese islands and paving the way for subsequent campaigns, including the Battle of Iwo Jima and the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which would lead to the Japanese surrender in 1945. While the exact number of soldiers saved by Ben's heroic deeds is not exactly documented, it is estimated that he protected dozens of wounded soldiers in the field hospital against the Japanese onslaught. His choice to bear arms and withstand the enemy invasion alone allowed enough time for the wounded and the medics who could still be evacuated and escaped the looming massacre. Salomon's resistance during his last moments allowed the hospital to be partially evacuated, saving the lives of many who would otherwise have been slaughtered by the Japanese forces. While his heroism was clear, Salomon's initial recommendation for the Medal of Honor was hampered by technical issues. Under the Geneva Convention, which protected medical facilities and personnel in combat zones, doctors and dentists could not lawfully be combatants, and some officers were reluctant to award him because of his role as a regimental surgeon. The documentation was buried, although many supported his recognition. True justice was to come decades later. In 1998, Colonel Donald Ballard, an Army surgeon and former commander who had also been awarded the Medal of Honor, took the initiative to reopen Salomon's case. Following a more thorough review of the events and historical documentation, finally, President George W. Bush posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor to Ben Salomon on May 1, 2002, officially recognizing his heroic sacrifice. Ben Salomon's remarkable heroism is still inspirational. His life story is celebrated in museums and military memorials, and he has become a symbol of heroism in the American Armed Forces.